Hello and welcome to my first video where I'm doing teacher training. My name is Chris Edwards and I hope you enjoy the video. We're going to be looking today at pronunciation. So if you're worried as I go through these points that you're not catching all the details, don't worry. I'm going to have a summary description down there beneath the video on this YouTube video. Okay, so as I said, we're doing pronunciation. This first video I'm going to be giving you a summary, an overview of what we're going to be doing in the following videos. And the first three things we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down pronunciation into three main areas. So the first area of pronunciation is sounds. So we're going to be looking at production of sounds in isolation. The second element we're going to be looking at is stress. Again, we'll be looking at in isolation. Then we'll be looking at intonation. And of course, the way to get wonderful, natural and comprehensible and even entertaining speech production is by accurate and natural harmonization and combination of those three elements. So putting together the sound production, the stress, and putting together the intonation. So once we've gone through those, breaking down those three elements, then the final and longest and most practically useful part for teachers is going to be the looking at practical teaching techniques. So how we're going to be putting together the sound production, the stress, the intonation, putting all those things together, and actually what can you do in the classroom? How can you actually get your students producing naturally? So that final stage will be the actual main teacher training part of the video, but to introduce that I want to actually break down the three elements. So now I'll talk briefly about each of those four stages and give you a summary of what we will be doing in each stage. So first of all, as I said, we're doing sound production. So we mustn't forget when we're talking about sound production, we need to be looking at the phonemic script. So basically it'll be something like this. I hope some of you have come across this book before. It's one of my favorites. And at the back of this, we've got actually a few things that can be used. But the first thing is that kind of phonemic script. So it shouldn't be blinding the students. We don't want to give them too much of this, but selectively used in the right way, when it's going to help the students, it can be magical and crucial to get some of these on the board. The other thing that's really useful about this book is the fact that it's got these two pages, which we'll talk about in much more detail in future and then later in this workshop, where we've got breaking down of the relationship between spelling and pronunciation, which is terribly important and problematic for students of English, as we all know. Okay, so individual sounds. So when we talk about individual sounds, we're looking at the consonants, we're looking at the vowels. We're looking at how sounds are combined. So when we're looking at vowels, we've got individual sounds. So we've got the a, the I, and the u, and the e. Also, we have diphthongs where we combine two vowels. So we have the a. So we've got the e sliding into a I, becomes a. And then also we've got combination of many different consonants. So for example, we have the p and the l, and that becomes pl. So we've got combinations of sounds and we've got individual sounds. Sometimes you have consonant clusters where you can have three consonants together. So where you have, for example, so it took me a moment there to think of it. The best consonant cluster example I can think of is the word strength. So at the end of the word strength, you've got the n, the g, and then going into the th. So you've got nth. So strength, and then that would be even more difficult to pronounce for the students when you've got the plural strengths. Anyway, so you've got combination of vowels, combinations of consonants. Also, we need to be looking at the sounds which go between words. So for example, when you've got the word black and then the word cat, we don't say black cat. In natural speech, we say black cat. So black cat. That becomes connected. Also, we have many different phenomena of word connections. So another example, which is called intrusion, where you have, for example, the word the and the word earth, and then in between you have an intrusive y sound, so it becomes the earth, a y sound in the middle. So that's all the sub-elements, if you like, of the first element of sounds. Secondly, there's stress, and again, stress can be broken down into various sub-elements. So we can talk about stress within a word. So we can talk about a two-syllable word like station, and then you've got the first syllable, station. It's not station, but it's station. So we need to talk about individual word stress. Then we need to make sure that students are aware of both primary and secondary stress. So you might have a very long word like organisation, where you've got a large stress on one syllable and a slightly smaller stress on another syllable. So we call that primary and secondary stress. And actually, stress can be extremely important for comprehensibility. So sometimes a word can be pronounced with the correct sounds, but with the wrong stress, and the wrong stress has a surprisingly large amount on the comprehensibility for native speakers. So it's really key. And then also we need to be looking at stress within sentences. So there'll be particular stress within a sentence. So you might say, can you tell me where the station is? And probably the word station will be coming out prominently, so that will be an example of word stress. So next we'll be moving on to the third element, which is intonation. So we can call this in a way the music of speech, the melody of speech. So it's the way the melody and the pitch and the tone of the voice can rise and go up and down in waves. We can be again looking at intonation within particular words. So for example, it can turn a question into a statement. You can say really, and then you can say really. And then the rising intonation makes it become a question, and then the falling intonation can make it become an affirmative statement. Also, we're going to be looking again at intonation, which doesn't only go through individual words, but it also goes through phrases, blocks and chunks of language, and it can also go through a whole sentence. Also, intonation can go from one sentence to the other, as I'm doing. So I might go up at the beginning, and then I might carry on like this when I'm continuing a list. And this is a pattern that is going to be useful for presentations and for delivering speeches and public speaking. And also intonation can run in very complex ways throughout a whole paragraph, when a politician, for example, is giving a very long speech and trying to make sure that it's all maintaining the listener's interest and it's all as clear as possible. There'll be pauses, there'll be a flow from the beginning of a paragraph to the end of a paragraph, and even from the beginning of the speech to the end of the speech you might find there are certain patterns and certain key movements of melody to make it more comprehensible and make it more memorable and maybe make it more entertaining. So those are the three elements of what pronunciation is, and then as I said, the fourth element will be going into practical teaching techniques. So we'll be looking at drilling, how to drill, how to do drilling in a clear way, how to combine drilling with board work, with clarity. That's where we'll be introducing some phonemes where it's done sparingly and appropriately. Then we'll be looking at how to integrate pronunciation into the various other areas of English language study. So how to integrate pronunciation into the four skills, so that's speaking, listening, reading and writing. The most perhaps pivotal point is, as I was mentioning earlier, the relationship between pronunciation and spelling. So there needs to be lots of work done to make sure students don't get confused about the seemingly illogical patterns sometimes where especially with vowels, where the vowel would suggest that you would pronounce it one way, but in fact you pronounce it another way. So we need to be looking at techniques on drilling, on how to integrate pronunciation into other areas in terms of the skills. Also, we can look at pronunciation and integrating pronunciation into the other three systems. So when I say the other three systems, I'm talking about integrating it into how we study lexis, how we make sure that the boardwork always combines a little bit of pronunciation help every time one bit of lexis goes on the board. Also, how we integrate pronunciation into grammar and discourse. So the four systems are pronunciation, lexis, grammar, and discourse, and we can always integrate pronunciation with the other three systems, and we always should. So it's all the different systems, all the different skills are working in harmony. So particularly with discourse, I was mentioning earlier how intonation can have an effect on affirmation or question indication. So that would be a very obvious example at the moment of how we could combine pronunciation and discourse. So that was the introduction to the workshop. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget, as I said, everything's down there below in the description if you didn't catch anything. And I look forward to going into lots more details in the following videos and explaining, most importantly, the practical teaching techniques of how to actually take things into the classroom and get the students pronouncing things clearly. Thank you. See you again.